The funeral service of the late Rhema Bible Church Pastor Ray McCauley will be held on the 19th of October. McCauley passed away at home on Tuesday evening surrounded by his loved ones. The pastor had stepped back from active church duties but remained fully committed to serving his church. In 1979, McCauley started the Rhema Bible Church under Rhema Ministries SA in the home of his parents, Jimmy and Doreen McCauley. The church is a multiracial melting pot of congregants that has at present about 45,000 members, and it is of course one of the largest churches in Southern Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa also sending his condolences to the McCauley family and the community of Rhema Bible Church. Let's now look at his legacy and speak to Tshepo Matseba, Managing Director at Reputation First Group, who is speaking to us about the legacy that Pastor McCauley now leaves behind. Good afternoon to you, Tshepo, and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, your reaction to the passing of Pastor Ray as he was widely known.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. I think my personal reflection is one of we've lost a leader. I think South Africa has lost a leader, someone who could represent the country across racial lines and across different sectors. He spoke to business people, he spoke to political leaders, and he also spoke to the religious leaders in the same sort of wavelength. He was very, very influential. In fact, most strategic leaders in our country seek counsel from Pastor Ray from time to time, from ordinary people, ordinary members of a church, to celebrities, to musicians, artists, but also to presidents. When you look at the extent to which he was often close to major politicians such as Nelson Mandela, former President Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, former President Jacob Zuma, and currently the President of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa. So clearly, you can see that this was a man of influence, impact, and a person with a conscience.
And described by some as one of God's generals, also, of course, others looking at the influence that he played when it comes to even founding Rhema Bible Church, for example. In your view, what becomes the legacy that he leaves behind, particularly when you look at the journey that the church has traveled so far?
Well, when you look at the legacy that he leaves, I mean, many churches around the world, and especially here in Africa, struggle with controversies around pastors being in it for money exclusively, and trying to create a perception that they can do things that are ordinarily impossible, such as making miracles and so on. But Ray McCauley actually ran Rhema Bible Church, and he says centered around one thing, that everything is around the word, and that word is in the book called the Bible, which is the foundation. And so he lived according to those values that are ascribed in the Bible. Of course, every organization and every church has got their own crafted values, but he lived according, he used the Bible and the word of God, as he says, as a foundation. And that foundation is the one that leads. And he used that same foundation to give. And when you look at a number of numerous, I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of people, but you look at the numerous people who came and developed into positive contributors to society, musicians, choir artists who are now preaching the word of God and living for a purpose that is larger than just music and entertainment. You can see that he made a tangible difference, but he extended that to a shared value philosophy where he shared as a group and as a church, he shared with the communities around the country. If you look at the work that his foundation, the church's foundation, has been doing in areas such as Soweto and different townships around the country, you can see that this was a purpose fulfilled, a person who had not only an idea, but one would say a calling, and that calling was fulfilled and lived in each and every day. And when you reflect on his life, some may say he had some controversies, perhaps he had access to some resources that some people may not necessarily have had, but what he has managed to do was to maintain a positive image and posture around himself, despite all the difficulties that he faced. And in fact, he lived almost a real human life. You know, some of the pastors, when you look at them internationally, religious leaders, they are unreachable. You would have to book and pay 20K to see them. But this specific individual, you could actually walk close to him. You could touch his hand. You could speak to him, despite, the level of authority and responsibility that he had in that church.
And I suppose it speaks to the simplicity of his message as well when it comes to, his messages on a weekly basis. You think about some of what you've touched on. Ekabelo Mabalane, for example, is a pastor now in that church. You think about Pushi, of course, as well, Pastor Pushi now. She used to also be in the entertainment industry, and it speaks of the simplicity of his messages and how far-reaching his messages would then be, because it was not only in church, but it spread even beyond.
Yes, I mean, he was, some may say, Rhema as a lot of sort of celebrity church, but actually Rhema welcomed everybody. And Pastor Ray's distinctiveness as a leader was that he was a teacher. So every time he spoke as a brand, and his reputation will live on in this manner, that he referred to the Bible. He's probably one of the few pastors I've met in the world who actually references the Bible and uses the Bible as an instrument to send a message to community. So he has a reference point. He doesn't sort of dream things around, but instead it's an authentic conversation, and he invested in counseling. He invested in teaching. There's no service that you would go to through at Rhema and not actually feel that you have been taught a lesson or two. Importantly, he also invited a community, developed a community of other leaders within the church movement that around the world who could visit Rhema and inspire and give energy. And simultaneously, he was also a frequent visitor to churches around the world in different countries for the period that his long tenure at Rhema. But here's a fundamental part, is that he has left a legacy of young leaders in Joshua McCauley, Kabelo Babalani, and many others who are young and who are able to take this journey forward. So he was not going to stay in power until the last day. In fact, he deliberately, as an ecosystem, developed a young, fresh team of leaders that can sustain what he believed is the promise that he wanted to fulfill. And I think he has lived a full life, a life that I would say is truly, truly purpose-driven, and that purpose has been realized and has impacted many leaders, including the late Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, and many entrepreneurs in the country were coached actually under his wing.
And definitely, and one of those, who would have really been mentored by him will be in conversation with my colleague Mfundo Mabalane, and that's Bishop Musa Sono, for example. Some of those that would regard themselves as his spiritual sons. You think about Joseph Prince in Singapore as well. So certainly a far-reaching legacy and influence there. Thank you so much for your time, Tshepo. I appreciate it. That was Tshepo Matseba, the Managing Director at Reputation First Group.